segments. Good stuff. How are you doing? How's your morning going so far, Jenna? You're calling from New York? No,
Los
Los
Angeles.
Angeles.
Yes, yes. Look at
This
you
is
go with
early.
people from
This is
around the world.
right. Okay. So this is still early for you, isn't it? Mhm.
Yes, but that's all right. I typically start my days before this, so it's all good.
Okay, wonderful. I appreciate you for making the time to speak with us today and to our audience. I'm going to do a quick introduction, but I would also invite you to speak a little bit about yourself as well. So Jenna Dillon, thank you for being with us. Jenna is the CEO, founder of Executive Performance Institute for Coaching. Jenna works with high-performing individuals and top-tier organizations. She helps accomplished and emerging leaders, aspiring leaders to achieve greater levels of fulfillment and success within their careers, lives, personal growth, organizational cultures, and so forth. So, all very much in related to the big topic that we've got here around obstacles to opportunities, which is big, broad terms here, but it's all about resilience and how that translates into innovation and growth as well. So, Jenna, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and then we'll dive into some of the details.
Sure. So really small snapshot. I have a very non-linear background that led me to becoming an executive coach, which will tell you I'm very right and left brain oriented. So I was in Chicago and went to school for two very different things, business management and dance. So I had my first career as a professional dancer for 7 years while I was in Chicago, but both during and after school, and then made my way into this second career in business management. Didn't know executive coaching existed until I hired a coach to help me figure out what kind of a practice I wanted to put together. And then very early on into hiring my first coach, I was like, this is what this is. This is far better than I thought it would be, and far better than what I thought I would do. So let's dive into that. And so I got formal training from there. And fast forward many years later, here I am.
Awesome, wonderful. And here we are today, and we're going to hear a lot of your unique perspectives, your experiences, and that of your clients as well. So let's talk about growth here. Um, Entrepreneurs, in my view, it's about a mindset. You could be a business leader, you could be an executive, you could be a solopreneur, you could be a department head, but you would have an entrepreneur element within that. So, Jenna, how do you transform some of these leaders or their executives, their biggest obstacles to growth and innovation? What's some of the broader themes that you look at?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I specialize in is working with this, think of it as like a psyche profile of high performers.
Hmm.
And how, I mean, if we even beg the question, like, are entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders of companies not high performers? Probably not. Like, they're probably high performers, right? So, what does that mean? So, when I work with high performers in this kind of framework of a psyche profile, I not only got to understand what that profile is, but the clients got to understand that. And so there's actually a set of, I would say to me, it's predictable, but there's a set of leadership challenges that come with being a high performer. And if we were to look at any like Stephen, what's a top tier company that most of the people in that company, not just the leaders, are high performers? Like what's one that comes to mind?
Apple.
Yeah, great. Okay, Apple. Yeah. I mean, I think anyone in the world, like if they know Apple, they're like, okay, there's high performers for sure in
Yeah.
that company. Like, how can they not be, right? And when you're a high performer and you've been a high performer for even a majority, if not most of your life, you're at the top of your game. I mean, that starts to be a given. You're at
Yeah.
the top of your game. And so if we put ourselves in the mindset of a high performer where they know they're at the top of their game, then what? Where do they go from here?
Mm.
So that's one part of the component. Another part is, okay, so they're a high performer, they know they're at the top of their game. Can their plate get any fuller?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. They're at the top of their game. Their plate can't get any fuller. They're often very used to being given even more work than an, I'll just say, average employee, because they're a high performer and they're used to feeling a certain set of associations to being busy, overwhelmed, yet bored at the same time, because they're at the top of their game and they're like, where do we go from here? Right. So they're at the top of their game. Plate can't get any bigger, and it's full, their plate's full. So then if they're used to feeling busy, stressed, or overwhelmed, yet bored at the same time, then what starts to happen in that pattern is they will seek to feel overwhelmed, stressed, busy,
Yeah.
maybe even anxious, because if they didn't feel that way, then they will to themselves, they will think, oh, my plate can get even bigger, which then means their plate wasn't full, which then implies they're not a high performer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this vicious little cycle here, right? And so to even understand how high performers can actually create their own caps,
Sure.
psyche wise, not just like tangibly with, I mean, it all shows up tangibly in the work environment in different capacities. But for them to be able to understand that, we got to figure out where the loophole is and how to hack it
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that it doesn't keep happening, right? So that's where, I mean, we really look at someone's, think of it as like a programming system, internal programming system or operating system. Like, what are their associations to success, failure, goal setting, not just what their goals are, all these things, to be able to understand it and then shape it,
Yeah.
reshape it, redefine it so that they're not making those same associations.
Yeah.
They're actually able to detangle with a coach, their own limits, their own habits of that's not what's not working for them and how they've capped themselves. So they motivate themselves from a very different place where it's not rooted in like fear or stress or overwhelmed, right? I'm
Yeah.
kind of, I get really excited about this, but
Yeah.
hopefully this all kind of, the system of it and the pattern of it kind of all starts making sense.
No, this is amazing, and I want to just segue into when you talked about conversations there, and I call them breakthroughs as well. So they're breakthroughs with individuals that you'd have, or individuals, they would have these breakthrough moments as you delve into their psyche, into their DNA, and how they operate. Share with us maybe some stories or the ways in which you do that through your coaching, and how entrepreneurs or leaders, business owners, whoever you do, how they've actually turned that challenge into an opportunity, so they know where they are at, they're operating at that level, and then you come along, and then you kind of start poking and prodding. Tell
Lovingly,
us a bit
right?
of tell us about those conversations and how those breakthrough moments actually happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I mean, I'm sure that you're going to find themes today in the summit. I was listening in to the people that were performing. And it was just really fun to see like some of the themes I see, the way they're talking, the way that I see my work. But I find that, when I come into the fold, if you will, it really matters how that client views me and our relationship. We're really partners. There isn't a hierarchy of someone being better or less than. So that's a big part of it, but more into how we work together outside of being a partnership, is, and think partners even, is I try to look at, well, again, let's detangle and get clear on what your programming or operating system is.
Yeah,
And that can be mind blowing and like not maybe overwhelming to some people. It can also be like a sense of awe to some people. It's fascinating to see how people will associate to the process of the work in coaching. And then from there, we look at, okay, well, what are their goals? What are their desires that they want to be accomplishing? And how can we create or redesign or reinvent this new programming operating system, and how we'll work together is we'll bite size short-term goals to what their longer term goals are. And so as they're working in these shorter increments of time, we not only are able to focus more on that shorter period of time while they are in process of that, but then we can assess and observe, how did that go? And did we have old residue from patterns that aren't helpful, that we've already recognized early on aren't helpful, coming into play here or taking over the show? Because that often happens, right? And when I say that often happens, right, I mean, that's rhetorical, but change takes time. True change takes time. And we humans are a fluid concept. That's actually a quote from a fun movie called Hitch that I love. That's why I laugh when I talk about it. But anyway, so point being is, if we really want to change in a way that's going to serve our environment, ourselves, and the people around us, then that's a very intentional kind of change versus, I mean, hate to break it to everyone if you haven't thought of this, but change is inevitable and we are going to change whether we want to or not. But if we want to intentionally develop ourselves and change, it takes time. So there's this residue that can come up, that is our former familiarity of patterns. And so all that to say, some pivotal moments that I would say clients have outside of recognizing something that they hadn't seen before in themselves that either wasn't working well or was working well, outside of that, um, some some things that I often find leaders or clients can be recognizing that's really instrumental in their growth is when they realize fear or stress or anxiety have been running the show, and the things that they're afraid about. Actually, I'll tell you a specific story because there's one that really stands out. And it was very early on when I started working with this founder of a tech company. And I was surprised how we just went deep real quick and got to like some serious root causes. And it was like within our first 3 conversations of working together, he was starting to open up and tell me about how it seemed like, even for the first time, he was admitting to himself that he was, on paper, looked great, super successful, had all these plates spinning, was actually working around the clock, but like had all this energy. And then in our meeting, in our like one of our first few meetings, he was recognizing and admitting to me and himself, he's deeply uninspired
Mm.
and deeply not satisfied. And he hardly, if at all, has any room to breathe to even recognize that. And then you recognize that. And I mean, if you think, if someone's working around the clock, has all these plates spinning, has a family, has this very successful company going, and then they have space to recognize that, that can be incredibly daunting, right? Not only that, many people have created a life where there's a lot of, he had a lot of duty that he felt like he wanted to, and liked taking ownership of the people that he cares about, the people in his company, like there was a lot of duty there, and then pressure that he was putting on himself to take care of those things. And so what was interesting was the very thing that was difficult for him to look at as to why he was uninspired. He wasn't looking at it because he was afraid it would threaten the things that he cares about, right? But what we realize is, if he didn't look at it, then the very things he's worried will be threatened actually will be threatened. Right? So people will create these whole narratives around, the thing that they're avoiding because they're afraid is actually the very thing that will bring them the fears and concerns that they don't want to have happen,
Mm.
right? Another thing that came about in that work together with this founder was, the outside of looking at the thing that was making him drastically happy, is he was getting in a rut. And many high performers do this, get in a rut of figuring out, well, once I figure out what the thing is, how am I gonna accomplish it? How am I gonna like make this work and make these changes? How? And we can get into, I call it like a brain hijack. We'll freak ourselves out on the how, that it's preventing us to get clear on the what.
Yeah.
And if we don't get clear on the what first, then we're not going to figure out the how that well because we don't know where we're going. We don't
Yeah.
know what we're trying to figure out, right? And I can sit back with my clients and we can laugh about like when we notice that we're doing that, we can laugh about it and make light of it. But it's fascinating. These are very common but very big things that we can do as people, not just as leaders, that put ourselves in our own way.
Yeah, that's really those stories were really really helpful because that just brings to life the experience of some of these leaders because I can relate to that because I've had those moments as well. When you talked about duty and what to do and what not to do and how to operate within those parameters as well. But speaking about parameters also, we're in this world where things are changing very rapidly, sometimes for the good, not for the good. Um, and when we bring about leadership and resilience here in broader terms, there are times when organizations are pressured maybe by external forces, regulations, and therefore leaders need to comply or adapt or adopt to those compliance requests. And then all the great things that they learn about resilience and leadership or how to operate kind of just goes out of the window sometimes. Sometimes. How how do you manage that with some of these leaders? I mean, like how do you bring the best of them under those circumstances? How do you teach leadership and resilience to people like that in those circumstances?
Yeah. Uh, that's a great question and a big question. So I'll do my best to have something concise for you. So um, I'll first talk about what I see and define resilience as, because sometimes with some of this language, people will have their own
Mhm.
definition and it's relative. So what I call resilience, and we can even use metaphors around like how the body does this, not just our minds,
Yeah,
is the ability to have something that is like take any kind of matter, whether it's a person's brain or a body, and it's someone's resilience is what I call someone's ability to stretch, bend, mold, and then come back to its form.
yeah,
Okay. Or and when we're looking at like the psyche, it's like, okay, there's adversity and you can bounce back. Like people use the term bounce back. Well, what I actually call resilience isn't just bouncing back to its original form, but once you've even stretched a muscle, you've actually built more opportunity to get that muscle stronger, right? The same thing happens with your mind. It's all a mind muscles, or your brain, I should say. It's all mind muscles. And so resilience doesn't just bring your brain or your performance back to its true form. It actually keeps reshaping it.
yeah.
So there's this growth and transformation with it. So with that said, I find that with coaching, um, I really think that leaders can focus. I mean, key things that I think leaders can focus on to build that resilience is humility.
Mhm.
Like the people that were talking in their panel before me were talking a lot around, how to be growth minded, and I think humility and curiosity is a big part of that. But I also want to add and give a fun kind of playful framework here. Executive coaching and is all based in science and different sciences like psychology, sociology, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, phenomenology. I could go on and on. And we look at science. Science is really, really powerful and resourceful and helpful for us. It's brilliant. And the concepts of science are linear. They're very process oriented and very structured. Does life work out linearly, Stephen?
No.
No. And so if I were to use any tool, but right now I use coaching, right? Clients, when they work with a coach, use coaching as the tool. If we use any tool that was based out of science in a linear structured way, when we're putting it next to life's circumstances and challenges, then it's actually quite limiting if we
Yeah,
use the tool linearly.
yeah.
So one thing that I find is actually more helpful is we have to figure out how we can leverage any tool. And in
Yeah.
this case, coaching, this is one of the reasons why I think my background as an artist and a creative complements the work that I do, because I don't use coaching as a linear structured tool. I love the science and I'm like a nerd about it. Hopefully you hear that in my voice, but we got to figure out how to use it in a non-linear creative way. Let's pick it apart. Let's turn it upside down. Let's play with it and see how we can reorganize some of these patterns to see if we can hit on monumental, not just insights, but new problem solving opportunities. When people are in adversity or
Yeah.
crisis, they're going to go linear because their brain's going, oh, there's a threat and I'm afraid and I have stress. And if
Yeah.
you put someone in a position like that, they're going to start problem solving with their emotions running the show, even if it's unconscious. What true problem solving and really heightened performance comes from is integrating logic and emotions together, but you don't want
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
emotions to be on defense.
Yeah.
So we have to get creative with it in our approach and really as coaches help our clients not be in that survival state.
Yeah, it's huge, and this concept was taught to me as well, and in a similar way when I took my first real-time coaching about a decade ago,
Mm,
gotten into an executive position, and yeah, I just didn't know how to handle things. I
yeah,
mean, and for me, um, the recognition that I couldn't was probably the one of the breakthrough moments
yeah,
for me. Uh,
yeah.
and I still fought it, even with a coach. I said, no, it's not me, it's them.
Yeah, right, right, yeah.
I'm good at what I do. See, I did all of this, and
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
but this is interesting, and I'm excuse me, the artistic influence on resilience piece is really good that you referenced there. I'm keen to just talk a little bit more about the innovative outcomes here. So, what kind of innovative strategies do you believe are most effective helping high performers or even getting people into high performance stage?
yeah.
Not only just to overcome adversity, but also, deal with uncertainty, bring more clarity, and so forth.
Yeah. So innovative strategies, gosh, I would say, well, outside of how I kind of have explained my process from a point of concept, we look at that operating programming system, understand it, connect it now to what could we reshape and change. There's all these associations to how someone relates or associates to success, to failure. And I'm actually recognizing that much of what I've talked about, at least in our conversation today, has almost been from a point of like internal or intrinsic leadership
Yeah.
challenges of like how a leader is processing between their ears, but it always translates in some form and fashion externally too, with how people are communicating and viewing others and interacting and engaging and motivating, all of that. So with that said, um, you know, I find that if people aren't being self-aware and aren't learning how to mind their mind, self-regulate, self-manage, and look at what are the ways that you're viewing success, what are the ways you're viewing failure, and
Mhm.
what I mean, because if leaders aren't conscious of that, then they're not going to be intentionally deliberate about what is the kind of work environment that we want to shape in our
Yeah.
organization, because a work environment is based off of the social norms of success and failure. And if the leaders of a company aren't recognizing their own ways that they relate to those things,
Mhm.
then they're going to be unintentionally creating social norms they don't mean to. And
Yeah.
that could be a very slippery slope, right? So, in terms of a work environment can even be for themselves, again, not just for the people in an organization. So being really mindful of and dig into understanding, how are you seeing success? What makes it successful? What determines a success to you? What determines a failure? I mean, I could go to town around all these like what seems very micro, but if it's not figured out and clear, then it's actually going to bubble up to the surface, and all of these likely not helpful ways or dysfunctional ways. Another thing that I find, and I don't see too many coaches talking about this, it is important to get clear on vision and goal setting and goals, excuse me. But what I don't see many people think about or work on is how they're associating to goal setting, not just what the goals are, you
Yeah.
know? So even looking at like, well, why do you set goals? What's the purpose of you setting goals?
Mm.
And do you set, like, I'll give some examples. Do you set goals so that you can hit them and pat yourself on the back?
Yeah.
Or do you set goals so that you can stretch yourself and more often than not, you actually rarely hit the goals that you set? And
Mm.
why is that? Like how are you actually associating to the ways that you set goals, not just what the goals are? And if people aren't figuring out and discovering how they are associating to goal setting, the goals actually don't matter then, do they? Right? So that, and again, this also applies in an organization and culture. So the leaders are innately, if they're not aware, they could be unintentionally training people how to view all of these things and
Yeah.
the norms that come with it. So I feel like that can be a lot, but to bring it back home concisely, get curious and do a little deep dive on how you're relating to these things because it really matters.
Yeah. Jenna, thank you so much. We're coming to a close very shortly here. In a minute, is there anything that you want to summarize or share with the audience, either within what you've described previously or anything new, in a minute?
Yeah, I'll actually end with the two top leadership challenges that most people face. So, the number one leadership challenge that most people face is that they drastically underestimate what they're capable of.
Mm.
Drastically. The second most common leadership challenge that most people face is that they drastically, there that word is again, underestimate what their teams are capable of.
Mm.
And so, with that in mind, I mean, this really goes back to there's a saying that I'm sure many people have heard this before, you can't do surgery on yourself.
Mm.
Well, our brain is actually designed in a way where we can't always do the surgery on ourselves. It's not designed that way. So that's where we look at, well, executive coaches are actually someone that can be for high performers or for people that are in high stakes situations and have to process and make decisions that really can impact quite a bit of people at any given moment. They got to be having someone there to support them to make sure that they're discerning properly, it's aligned to the values of the organization, they're thinking about the stakeholders that are, I mean, all these things. Like, you want somebody there to kind of protect your processing, your discernment, and be able to, in a way, make you quite humbled of, "Wait, there's things you're not seeing here,"
Yeah.
or, "There's things for you to, like, think about before you make this decision that you weren't thinking about. Did you notice you weren't thinking about that?" That actually can make and break not just a person, but an organization.
Yeah.
So, that's what I'll end with.
Jenna, it's been a pleasure hearing you and you speaking about all these different strategies, but also these concepts which are true. And it's been an honor to have you here. Thank you so much, Jenna, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So.